Hey, as long as I'm sort of talking about testosterone, I thought maybe I would make a separate video, just kind of discussing, detailing a little bit the progression of my thoughts about it, just because I've been thinking about my identity and sort of what steps I wanted to take with transition for quite a while. I think as a lot of people do, and it's taken me a while to get to the point where I feel confident enough to start testosterone. So I thought maybe I would just sort of trace the development of that. So in a nutshell, I started seriously questioning, like consciously questioning my gender identity starting last March, so about a year and a half ago. And initially, I was really just kind of mulling things over and trying to hear other people's experiences and sort of figure out the basic parameters of my options and stuff. And some of the different identities that were out there, some of the different medical paths and stuff. So I took a while, like several months, just looking into things and also starting to experiment with binding. Was one of the first things I started doing. You know, then basically as soon as I learned about, the existence of top surgery and kind of had heard from enough people to sort of convince myself that it was a fairly safe procedure and such, and fairly, common procedure, I basically decided that that was something that I was interested in. And at that point, it was just mostly a matter of convincing myself or sort of coming to the realization that it didn't really matter how I identified and that I could pursue top surgery regardless of that. So, and also it didn't matter if I wanted to go on T, I could pursue top surgery regardless of that. So I started like looking into that. Like that was one of the first things that interested me. Then but, I was thinking about, it was not that testosterone wasn't, in the back of my head for most of this time. It was just that I felt a lot more ambivalent about it. I was still really questioning sort of the really basic, really basic questions of how I wanted to be perceived and how I identified. In light of all of that, I was kind of, I was really not sure about it. I was a little bit skeptical that I would ever try, but it was nice to know that it was sort of an option. So, I started learning more about that as well. I actually, I've been sort of periodically writing down some of my thoughts about this, and I looked back, and I think in September was one of the first sort of formal entries that I had made, talking about this stuff. And at that point, I sort of detailed some of the things that seemed promising about testosterone, and then the things that I wasn't so excited about or was concerned about, and then the things I felt kind of ambivalent about. And basically, what I felt mostly positive about was, or sort of, interested in, was the redistribution of body fat was a big thing. And the easier development of muscles sounded nice. And then the voice lowering, actually, even at that point, like more than a year ago, I was interested in having a lower voice. That sounded kind of appealing to me. And also, there was another factor, and I can't recall. Oh, and stopping periods, right? Because, who needs those? And then, but the things I was more concerned about included body hair. I was not very comfortable with that, as I feel like that's a fairly common trend. I feel like that takes a lot of people some time to get used to that idea. And also acne I was concerned about. I've never had super horrible acne, but it's definitely been a part of my life since puberty, and it hasn't necessarily totally gone away at this point. I mean, I'm 25 now, almost 26. So, the prospect of having to deal with it even a little bit worse concerned me, and I wasn't quite sure what my options for treatment of that were either. For instance, like how does the whole, birth control prescription work if one is on testosterone? Like, does that, how does that whole thing work? Because to get a prescription for Accutane, which is hopefully not something that I would have to pursue, but some people do, and it really is quite an effective acne solution as far as I can tell. You need to prove that you're on a certain amount of birth control and stuff, which I think is frankly grossly paternalistic, but that's a topic for another day. So acne didn't sound super great, and then I knew that there were anecdotal links to certain cancers, particularly cancers of the reproductive organs, and I was concerned about that. That was not something that I wanted to have to deal with. So those were mostly the things that I was concerned about. And then the ambivalence to, somewhere from ambivalence to slight discomfort covered everything from facial hair to, genital growth to, there may have been one or two other things under that category as well. Yeah, so I had very mixed feelings about it. Even in September, there were certain things that sounded super exciting, but I wasn't quite sure. So I think it's really just been over the course of this whole year that a number of things have changed.